Hello, everyone. How are you? It is good to see everyone. Welcome to Long Beach. Yeah. It is great to have you all here for the 109th meeting of the Ecological Society of America. Whew, 109 years? Wow. My name is Sarah Anderson, and I work as an ecologist with the U.S. Forest Service, and I have the honor of serving as chair of ESA's Public Affairs Committee. And as we open ESA's 2024 annual meeting, we do want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the diverse indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which scientists from now around the world are now gathering. So please join me in viewing this special welcome from Tina Calderon as we officially open the meeting.
Mi hija nehinkam netwanya netina komikrabetna ha tongve koi mixkanakan koi yo eme awesh koneha ekwa avo mane te hovet tamet. Hello, my relatives. I am Tina Orduno Calderon, Gabrielino Tongva, Ventureño Chumash, and yo eme. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. I thank you for asking me to do a land acknowledgement. So I'll start by acknowledging the Tarahatam, the original peoples, past, present, and emerging of Tovangar, which is today called Los Angeles County, parts of Orange County, parts of San Bernardino County, as well as the 4 Southern Channel Islands. And I also acknowledge all of the ancestors across Turtle Island. I'm so grateful for the teachings that we all have in living in reciprocity with the nature, with the lands, the waters, the minerals, the animal and plant relatives across our huge territories here in Turtle Island. And I like to always remind people just to walk gently upon our Earth Mother, to give her the love and respect that she deserves. And I'm going to offer a ancestor song, and this will be in the Tongva language. Te hovet tamer honuk vetam, 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 tu me komi ketai me paime, 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 te hovet tamer honuk vetam, 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 tu me komi ketai me paime, 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 te hovet tamer honuk vetam. That song just greets our ancestors from all 4 directions, and I wish you blessings. And again, thank you for this opportunity. Awesh koneha.
That was pretty amazing. And if you would like to watch that acknowledgement again and the welcome address again, or if you would like to share it, the video can be found in the online program and in the meeting app. So as we open this meeting, we also would like to recognize the impact that it takes to bring us all together. To recognize and help mitigate our effect, ESA is pleased to donate over $14,000 to offset this meeting's environmental footprint to the Friends of Ballona Wetlands that champion and the restoration and protection of Los Angeles' last coastal wetlands. So please stop by and see them in the exhibit hall. And while in the exhibit hall visiting the Friends of Ballona Wetlands, make a point to visit the sponsors and exhibitors who we would like to thank for their support of ESA and this meeting. The exhibit hall will be an exciting place throughout the week where you'll find posters, morning coffee, and afternoon refreshments. And tonight, immediately following the plenary, the exhibit hall will be the site of the welcome reception. So many of ESA's sections and chapters, along with sponsors and vendors, will have their exhibits set up and ready to go. We encourage you to visit them, network with your fellow meeting attendees, and enjoy some light refreshments. As we begin, ESA wants to ensure a safe meeting space for all. To that end, we expect participants to adhere to the ESA Code of Conduct for Events. You will find it in the print and online programs, in the app, and posted in the hallways and throughout the meeting. It describes the behaviors that are expected of all of our members and guests, actions that are unacceptable and their consequences, and it provides information on how to report unacceptable behavior, which can be done through the online portal, by email, or by phone. Last, a reminder that COVID is still with us, along with many other illnesses, and although not required, wearing a mask is optional. We ask that you respect each individual's choice to mask or not. So now, after all those announcements, it is my pleasure to turn over this sessions to ESA's current president, Shahid Naeem, who will be more formally introduced to you tomorrow, and who tonight is recognizing ESA members engaged in policy and will present ESA's Regional Policy Award. Shahid?
Well, welcome everyone. That's a hard act to follow. So much energy and animation. I'm afraid I'm an old lecturer who tends to focus on the details. So I'm going to try to stick to the notes here. I was given a few minutes to ad-lib, which they probably will regret later on. But just to say welcome again to Long Beach, to the ESA annual meetings. I'm its current president, but I do almost nothing without the advice and counsel of the two other presidents, Sharon Collins and the next coming president, who will be taking over from me. And then this is my last year here as the president, in the hot seat, as I call it. So I was going to say, has it escaped your attention that I thought I'd bring it to your attention? I'm actually old. I'm actually quite proud of it. And one of the things about being old is that my students who come to me for advice about writing, about statistics, about graphical presentations or zoological or botanical nomenclature, they now ask me what it's like to be old. And the reason I bring that up today is because I was in the Arctic a couple of weeks ago, and at lunchtime with the students, they said, "Shahid, you're old," right? A little bit more politely. But they said, it seems like we live in some very tumultuous times. And they wanted to know if, in my long experience, things have gotten worse. And I said, and you may disagree with me, I didn't think that it did. Now, I said, I was in 6th grade when President Kennedy was assassinated. And since then, I remember a number of other sort of assassination events. And I think what was on their mind was the attempted assassination on Trump, the candidate for the Republican platform. And I went on to say, I lived through the Vietnam War. There was the Khmer Rouge. And then, we had many economic downturns and some positive ones as well. But I also said that if you looked at the things that have been happening, the population has been increasing quite a bit. When I was a kid, I remembered going to 3 billion, and we cheered, "Go humans, go!" Right? And I will probably live long enough to see it triple, go to 9 billion people in a few years. So they said, well, what's different if it seems like there's good, there's bad, there's progress, there seems backwards movement at time? And I said, the difference is that the stage in which all of humanity's interactions are occurring is the environmental stage, and that is under tremendous pressure now. And, Jane Lubchenco has warned me not to talk about the environmental litany, so I won't mention things like climate change or invasive species or mass extinction, because that would just be a downer. Instead, I would say that what's really amazing was, in fact, the people at that table, the students, and all of you who've come here, found the time and the resources to join in with the largest community of ecologists who tackle the environmental platform on which the human sort of theater unravels. And we'll have another plenary tomorrow, and I'll see you then there again. But today, I think what's really exciting is that we're focusing on policy, because that has become extraordinarily important in what we do as scientists. So it's a great pleasure to see everyone here and to welcome this kickoff event. Its theme is supporting ecologists through their careers, which is why I wanted to start out with the story of the young people asking me what they saw was their role in this modern world. While most of our members work in academia, this is changing. Many ESA ecologists, especially our students and early career ecologists, are moving from pursuing an academic career to a career in the private sector, federal agencies, and in public service. Many of my students, hope they're out there, actually work for places like Nature Conservancy, USGS, NOAA, and so forth. And a number of my students have gone on to academic jobs as well, but our roles are expanding. ESA is adapting and becoming a society that provides room for all ecologists and all ecological careers. ESA is passionate about creating a culture and work environment that values diversity, equity, inclusion, safety, and a sense of belonging for everyone, including age, race, gender, sexual identity, disability, and even profession. SA dedication to DEI is vital to us because diversity in all aspects of ecology is fundamental to our core values. I know reading annual reports of societies is probably not the top on your reading list for the summer, but I would encourage you to look at ESA's 2023 annual report to see what incredible progress we have made in the DEI space. ESA and its members have a role to fill in society by bringing their ecological knowledge to bear in policy and the application of ecological science that is especially important as we are living in a time of unprecedented global change. ESA is active in raising the profile of some of the science of ecology with policymakers and providing opportunities for members to engage in policy. One example is the ESA Catherine MacArthur Graduate Student Policy Award. In March of this year, 12 ESA student members from across the country came to DC to participate in the Policy Award experience. It's an extraordinary opportunity to actually get scientists at the early stages in their career to engage and understand the functioning and importance of policy. They received federal policy and communications training and heard from colleagues about their experiences working as scientists in federal agencies. The event culminated in over 35 meetings with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, representing many states to advocate for the use of sound scientific knowledge in making laws and to advocate for federal funding. This funding is to support basic and applied ecological research across federal agencies. To date, over 160 ESA student members have participated in this policy experience. In addition, ESA provides several opportunities for members to engage in policy and communicate with media, and we thank them. I'm sure many of you have seen the policy briefs that come out of ESA, we really do try to make sure our society has a good connection to what's going on in that arena. With the current and former graduate student policy awardees, policy section members, communication and engagement section members, public affairs committee members, and members of the ESA Policy and Media Rapid Response Team, please stand so we may acknowledge you and say thank you for representing ESA in ecology. Might be hard to see them in the dark, but would you please rise? I hear there are a bunch of them. All right. Next time my students ask me for evidence that the world is really going in a positive direction, I'll have them contact you. I have your email. All of these opportunities are open to ESA members, so get involved. It's important, okay? So I'd like to now go to the presentation of the 2024 Regional Policy Award to Heather Dyer. So I'm going to introduce her. Every year during the annual meeting, ESA recognizes an elected or appointed local policymaker whose record reflects the use of ecological science to inform policy decisions. ESA is honored to present its 17th Annual Regional Policy Award to Heather Dyer, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. She was promoted from the agency's endangered species biologist with an expertise in fisheries and river ecosystems to become its CEO in 2019. So for those of you who are scientists and think that you won't be able to find your way into these sorts of roles, you can, and your knowledge is very valued. She is the first female CEO to hold the position in the agency's 70-year history. It's rare for biologists with ecosystems expertise to transition from technical science work to executive management. She is a role model for ecologists who may want to apply their scientific knowledge in public service career. Ms. Dyer uses an integrated science and technology approach to create solutions that support surface and groundwater management, habitat and ecosystem protection, and wildlife prevention for a resilient future. She was instrumental in creating the Upper Santa Ana River Habitat Conservation Plan, a regional environmental program that will protect and implement recovery actions for 22 native species in the Santa Ana River. ESA is honored to recognize Ms. Dyer and present the 2024 Regional Policy Award to her. So she'll step out. You to give a few remarks.
Thank you all. I'm so pleased to be here. I did prepare a couple remarks, but I'll probably go off script. So first, let me thank the ESA for this award and recognition in leadership. This is so meaningful to me because I'm being recognized by my scientific peers. I'm not going to lie, when I took the job at the Water Agency in 2010, I had been a federal endangered species biologist and regulator. It was a very unlikely move, and I was actually worried that a lot of my scientist peers would no longer take me seriously, maybe wouldn't trust me, wouldn't want to collaborate with me. So to stand here today and be honored by the Ecological Society of America is a big honor, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Through this journey, I have learned a lot, and so I want to share a couple key things that I have learned in this very unlikely path that I have taken. First is that you can lead from anywhere, and you can have influence from anywhere. I'm not going to lie, I want to change the world. I want to make it a better place for our children and our grandkids. I want to have open spaces. I want to have biodiversity. I want to be able to address the tremendous challenges that we have in the face of climate change and all of the impacts that come with it. And so to think that I could only do that from the field, from the river, from doing scientific studies was limiting. It was only when I realized that I could lead from a place of, unlikely water district position, which I never imagined that I would even have an opportunity, nor that I would want it. I just couldn't imagine the potential for change that was coming my way. And so I encourage every single one of you, no matter where you are in your career, to think about what you want to achieve and how you might best have a voice in that change that you want to see in this world. And be open-minded, to take a risk, to have courage, to go to a place that you might not have imagined early in your career. I can still remember my first job with USGS counting stems of Spartina in the salt marshes of Louisiana, thinking, what in the hell am I doing here? This is not what I went to school for. But that job led to the next job, which led to the next job, and here I am 19 years later, and I'm the CEO of a water agency in California. I'm the only endangered species biologist, I think, to ever get that job, but it is a position of influence, and I am able to affect change from here, as I have been able to throughout my career, and so I encourage you to embrace that. As in many things in nature, diversity is a superpower. Diversity of thought, sitting around the table, diversity of those voices and that background and that technical expertise and those positions of power, all sitting around the table, collaborating on common solutions, I believe is the way that we are going to address some of these tremendous challenges that we have. And so get yourself around those tables. Open up the minds of the people around you to know that there's something different possible. I remember trying to get the board of this water agency when I first started in 2014 to fund a $150,000 USGS study of the Santa Ana River native fishes, and they thought, what? Why would we pay for this? Why would we want to know how many endangered fish are out there in the river? But data led to knowledge. And knowledge led to the understanding of the river system. And understanding the river system led to trust amongst all of the parties that are working in the river. And that was key to affecting real change. So what I ask of all of you, if you can learn anything from my story, is that anything is possible in your career, and to have the courage to go after it, to be different, to say yes to that opportunity, and to sit around the table where we need the voices of the environmental NGOs and the wildlife regulators and the water agencies and the private sector interests and experts that can all be part of the discussion on how we're going to have positive change. I'd like to thank all the people who helped me get here, who had the courage to hire me or to tell me what I needed to do. And if you're a student and this is your very first professional meeting and you're probably given a poster session thinking, what am I supposed to do when I'm standing there? Just know that this is the first step in a path that can lead you to your dreams, that can lead you to be a change maker. And put in the effort and find those people who can be your champions. And I hope that someday you will be standing on this stage and an accepting award for being a leader in policy and changing the world. Thank you very much.
Wow, it makes me wonder why I became a professor. Right. I think I became a professor because I really lived vicariously through my students. And you know, there really has been a change. Many of my students in the early days studied, you know, the flora, the fauna, the microbial communities. And we asked questions about whether diverse communities were stable or not. But my recent students have worked on eco-friendly coffee in Chiapas, Mexico, the importance of dung beetles in agriculture in California, biodiversity in the Maasai rangeland. And we really have moved into an era where ecology is coupled with the human dimension. In recognition of that, the Ecological Society of America, after a long set of deliberations, introduced the new journal, which is called Earth Stewardship. And it's my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Hooper Sandwell, one of my favorite editors-in-chief. She describes herself as a seedling in our family of trees because it's a brand new journal. I'll leave her to give you a quick description of the journal and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shahid. Hello, everybody. It's great to see so many ecologists and probably also non-ecologists curious about learning what this society is all about, gathered here jointly this evening. I very much hope you enjoy this upcoming week, in particular by sharing the same space and time in person. We have learned to appreciate this through the pandemic. I hope you will engage in conversations, in discussions with your friends and colleagues. Engage with also those who are maybe younger or older than you, those who you don't know. Reach out to them, learn from their experience, and listen what they have to tell you. And thereby contribute to building community. I am extremely honored and also filled with gratitude to stand here and introduce our opening plenary speaker for this annual meeting, whom I will present in a second. I'm also very honored to be here as editor-in-chief of the youngest journal of the ESA journal family. Like Shahid said, I consider myself an editor-in-chief seedling, and I would like to invite you to learn more about the ESA publishing program and our new ESA Wiley partnership journal, Earth Stewardship. This journal is an outlet for the results of transdisciplinary social ecological research, community-based stewardship, and of co-production of solution-focused Earth stewardship research across the planet. These initiatives foster the inclusion of perspectives from the Southern Hemisphere and other underrepresented peoples and regions, as well as collaborations between researchers, community members, and practitioners, experiences that we just heard from Heather, a perfect contribution to Earth stewardship. This can contribute to integrate social, ethical, and artistic dimensions of stewardship, to provide a broader intercultural and participatory foundation for this journal, Earth Stewardship. In particular, we want to engage with indigenous and local knowledge and practices as they reflect the deep understanding and the connection to the land and the sea. With this journal, we will establish new platforms in content and format by novel contributions and to best share and communicate the wealth of knowledge systems, worldviews, and experiences on human nature, planet connectedness and interdependency, and on community building at large. I envision Earth stewardship emerge as a new generation boundary journal that will position itself as a bridge builder between theory and action, disciplines of the natural and social sciences and humanities, science and society, science and policy, science and art. This evening, there seems to be a common thread of ecologists and biologists working in leadership positions in boundary-spanning organizations, where they also apply and use their scientific knowledge. It's truly inspiring. This includes tonight's speaker, Jackie Grant. She's the executive director of Grant Stairs Escalante Partners, which is the official friends group of the Grant Stairs Escalante National Monument. She came to the position after 20 years embedded within academia, where she progressed from PhD to David H. Smith Fellow and finally to full professor of biology and the Department of Geosciences at Southern Utah University. Her organization was created with its potential as an outdoor laboratory on the frontier of scientific research that continues to regularly reveal important insights into our planet and our past. Prior to becoming the executive director, she immersed herself and students in the vast desert landscapes of southwestern Utah, and northern Arizona. Her work with Seeds of Success, native plant seed collection, and pollinator studies led to the development of amazing relationships with tribal, federal, and non-federal partners. She finished her career at Southern Utah University as a Fulbright scholar to New Zealand, where she studied indigenous and non-indigenous methods of seed banking and restoration. As EIC, I would like the journal Earth Stewardship to be a venue for the formation of effective partnership, fostering plurality in its broadest sense. Therefore, Jackie, I would love you to consider telling your success story, as much as also Heather, to the audience of Earth Stewardship. Thank you for being here with us, Jackie. The stage is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. And some of my story has already been told, but as you can tell, or you will be able to tell soon, I was a lecturer at a teaching university for a really long time. So today's seminar will be kind of like a lecture in a little bit of ways. So we're going to start out with an outline. We're going to talk about introduction. Who am I? Why am I here? And what are BLM conservation lands? What is a friends group? What does my organization, Grand Staircase Escalante Partners, do? And why is it important to track policy? And then we'll hopefully have time for a few questions at the end. All right, so who am I? As many people in academia will experience, you can have lots of titles over the course of your career. So mostly I'm known as an educator and a scientist, but also as a pollinator biologist, sometimes just a botanist, but it's hard to be a botanist without understanding something about the pollinators. I was an Earthwatch project leader for a while at the university, and a museum curator and director, a federal and tribal partner, and all of the things academia. I've been a lecturer, an adjunct, an assistant professor, associate, and a full professor. My career started in academics at Texas A&M University, Gig 'em Aggies. Hey, all right. Then I went on to Cornell University, where I got 2 graduate degrees, a master's in animal science with a focus on nutritional toxicology, and a PhD in neurobiology and behavior, where I studied caterpillars. So you can see I was just all over the place, but I was having a good time and I really liked academics. After grad school, I went on to become a Smith Fellow, which is an awesome program that focuses on conservation science postdocs. And then my first job was at Michigan Tech. Too much snow, we left. Then I moved on to Penn State. Too long of a commute, and my husband wanted to be at a teaching university. So then we found ourselves at Southern Utah University, where I was able to partner with tribal groups, the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, many different federal agencies, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management. And when I say BLM here in this talk, I'm talking about the Bureau of Land Management and not Black Lives Matter. I have to clarify that a lot in Southern Utah, where I'm from. The National Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service. Turns out in Southern Utah, there aren't a lot of PhDs running around, so you get asked to be involved in a lot of different partnerships. Okay, oh, you know what? I gave away something there. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, why? Well, we'll just go ahead. I became the executive director in January of this year of Grand Staircase Escalante Partners, which is the friends group of Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But before we go any further, I'd just like to step back, because when you see a slide like the previous slide, you think, oh boy, here's another overachiever who has led a charmed life and just done all the things and has not had any problems. So let's first think about where I've been situated for the last 13 years. In Southern Utah, you can see on this map of the United States where Utah is located. It is a notoriously red state, not just because of the color on the map. And I was located in Cedar City, Utah, which is way down 3.5 hours south of the major urban center of the state, Salt Lake City. Okay, so I knew what I was getting into when I moved to Utah. And sure enough, my husband got a job right away. I applied for 5 different jobs, 4 of which were offered to men, and then finally at the 5th time around, it was 5th time's a charm, I was offered a job, and because my husband was already in the system, I knew what everyone else earned, and it was more than what I was offered. And we can talk about how I responded to that later, but as you can imagine, there was a big cognitive load knowing that it took me 5 times to get in here. And now I felt like an imposter, and I knew I was getting paid less. So I thought I understood the assignment, that I was now going to have to work harder than everybody else. So I taught more than 20 different courses at this university. I published peer-reviewed papers with students. I oversaw thousands of visitors to the Museum of Natural History, which was also part of my job. So I had to teach, and I ran this Museum of Natural History. I provided service to the community. Through the Bureau of Land Management, I served on a monument advisory committee, which helped provide scientific input to the Bureau of Land Management for a national monument. I was the vice president at the Society for Vice President for the Society of Conservation Biology, and I helped bring in a $3 million congressional appropriation for Cedar City, Utah, to build a park and bike trails and new infrastructure in the city. And I also won lots of awards because I really wanted to be equal to everyone else in that cohort of hires. And by the end of by the time I was an associate professor, some years I was bringing in 60% of all external funding to my college. And at this point, everyone, I was tired. I was really tired. I was working hard, and the pandemic hit. I was supposed to go to New Zealand as a Fulbright scholar in 2020, and of course that did not happen. But by 2023, they did open their borders, and I was allowed to go in. And when you leave your home institution, you often get a much different perspective on life. And that's exactly what happened to me while I was in New Zealand. So when I came back from New Zealand, oh no. We skipped through a slide. Okay, hold on. There's supposed to be like an amazing picture up next that's just gonna stun you in its amazingness. There's only 2 buttons on this remote control. Oh, what is going on? Well, my picture's not there, so we'll use this picture instead. Anyway, I got back from New Zealand, and I wasn't offered anything. I got back from New Zealand, and my eyes were open. I was looking at the world in a much different way. And this job came up to become the executive director of Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, which, take my word for it, is a spectacular place. It's amazing, it's beautiful, and I had been working there collecting seeds and helping foster research with the Bureau of Land Management for several years during my professor job, and I wanted to join this organization. So it was the Friends group of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and I'm off my game now. All right, so the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument is part of the Bureau of Land Management's National Conservation Land System. So, what is that? Okay, words, yay. So, National Conservation Lands are lands administered by the Bureau of Land Management that are designated by Congress or the President through usually the Antiquities Act. These lands are designated to conserve special features And it's a very young system. It's only 24 years old. So unlike the National Park Service, which has a long history, the National Conservation Land System is not as well known, and it's still getting its feet under itself, or its feet on the ground, to figure out what it's all about. But there are some amazing lands within this system. There are 905 units, which is how the BLM describes these different land units that it manages. So there are national monuments, there are conservation areas, there are wild and scenic rivers, scenic and historic trails, and wilderness areas. In total, and again, this is BLM administered lands, there are 37 million acres of land in this system. And this provides us all, as ecologists and biologists and social scientists, with opportunities to partner with the land managers themselves. So again, Grand Staircase Escalante Partners is my organization, and I'm now, luckily, the executive director of that organization, and it's a friends group. It's the official friends group for the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and we'll talk now about what is a friends group. So this is a picture of some of our volunteers and our staff out on the monument doing some work, stewardship work, cleaning up trash, helping with vandalism, but we do a lot of this work for this organization. And the BLM has a specific definition for a national conservation land. It is a private, independent, nonprofit organization, and it's managed primarily by volunteers or paid staff, where we are getting paid for our work. The organization's mission is to assist and support the BLM in its management of a site, a facility, or a program. And for us, it's the site. It's the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. However, friends groups can vary in size, in their structure, and in their purpose. They can have many different purposes. So what does a friends group do? Sometimes you help facilitate a lecture on public lands, like this picture shown here. So these people are learning from a Hualapai woman from the Hualapai Nation in Arizona about native plants on the Escalante National Monument, because multiple tribal nations have a history and a connection to the Grand Staircase. So what can we do as defined by the BLM? Volunteer services, visitor programs like educational programs, special events, could be anything you could dream up. Lots of fundraising, because we do want to get paid for our work and we want to grow our staff. Building community relations. This is a tricky one for us because the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument was the first national monument in the BLM National Conservation Land System. And as such, it generated a lot of antipathy from people who lived around the monument and people throughout the state of Utah. So as an example of this, just a few months ago, our organization was referred to as the Al-Qaeda of Southern Utah. But we clean up trash, right? So we're not a terrorist organization. We clean up trash and we promote science. Another thing that you can do as part of a friends group is advocate for the site or the program. And our particular organization, we focus a lot on stewardship, so cleaning up the messes that are around, conservation, especially around non-native plants and trees, and we're now developing some science-related programs. What does our conservation program do? Russian olive removal. So Russian olive is a non-native tree, and we spend a lot of time and energy trying to control this tree and keep the areas, the major beautiful river that flows through the monument, we try to keep the trees out of there because it changes the hydrology of the river. The organization has been working on this for 20 years, and we've spent over $11 million trying to get the Russian olive under control in the watershed. We've just now started working on some erosion control techniques, low-tech process-based restoration techniques, if you're into that world. we host an annual symposium that focuses on the science of the monument and the Escalante River watershed. And we are an integral partner in the Escalante River Watershed Partnership, or ERWIP. This organization brings together multiple federal agencies and soon-to-be tribal nations to work together on the Escalante River watershed so that we can improve the health of the watershed and connect it back to the people. We also engage in something called WSA monitoring, so Wilderness Study Area Monitoring, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But this picture here, this map, just gives you a little bit of a taste for the expanse of the monument, just focusing on the Escalante River watershed. So the watershed itself is approximately 1.2 million acres in size. So we have to split that up into 52 separate segments, which we visit on a rotating basis to check for Russian olive and engage in other monitoring activities. The different colors on this map show you different agencies that are involved in the management of this landscape. It ranges from the Forest Service to the BLM to the National Park Service. So we have a lot of partners to juggle. So what is a WSA? A WSA is a wilderness study area, and wilderness study areas were initially created, the first batch of them, in 1976 when Congress asked the Bureau of Land Management to evaluate all land that it administers to determine whether or not parcels of that land had wilderness characteristics. If the land did have wilderness characteristics, then eventually it might be able to be put into the National Wilderness Preservation System and officially declared wilderness. Right now, the land is essentially sitting there in limbo, waiting to be turned over to the wilderness system or not, depending on its characteristics. So in the meantime, all of these different units, these wilderness study areas, and there are other terms that people use to describe wilderness study area, or anyway, there's a lot of words that the government uses for how it calls land. But in the meantime, the land is sitting there and it has to be managed. It's the law that the land has to be managed by the agency, in our case the BLM, and checked every month to make sure no impairments are happening. So if we look at a map of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, everything in yellow on this map is part of the monument. The light yellow, the brighter yellow, all part of the National Monument. And the bright yellow that you can see, those are the wilderness study areas in our particular monument. So as a scientist, I got pretty excited because that's 47% of the monument that is designated as a wilderness study area being managed for potentially being vetted into the wilderness system one day. It's about 880,000 acres, and the monument staff, the BLM staff, has been collecting data on the 15 or so different wilderness study areas within the monument every month since it was created in 1996. So, right, you're thinking, if you are into data, you're like, that is a lot of data. Where is it? What can we do with that data? So I asked them if I could get my hands on it and we could start working on it, and the answer was yes. And this is what it looked like. Now, if you're a social scientist, you're probably pretty excited about this. Narrative data is cool. The only quantitative information in this entire gigantic database was the date that they took the report. Okay? So if you're not a social scientist, maybe you feel like this. Like, oh no. But I had been able to spend some of my time as an academic doing a little bit of work with data visualization and writing some code. So we were able to go through all of this data and look at impairments. So this is how the BLM manages the database. They need to know, has the wilderness characteristics, have they been impaired? And if they have to remediate that or rehabilitate it to make sure that the land still stays in that state of being ready to go into the wilderness system, should that ever be designated by Congress. So we looked at camping and fire rings. If you're going to a wilderness area, you don't want to go to a campground. You're there for a specific reason, and there's a legal definition that it can't be a campground. So we used camping. We found every single word you could possibly imagine for camping and fire pits and coded our database so that it pulled out all the reports that mentioned camping. Human waste, that was quite an interesting one. There are lots of ways to talk about human waste, and some backcountry rangers are very formal, and some are not formal at all. Social trails, right? We're not supposed to create new routes in wilderness study areas. So we wanted to find out about social trails and when they were being seen. Trash, lots of words for trash, vandalism, and vehicle-related intrusions on the monument. No roads should be created in wilderness study areas, so we needed to pull that out of the database. And then grazing. We wanted to look at how has grazing changed over the years. So we started with a pilot data set of 3 wilderness study areas and looked at all of these impairments over time from 2006. Now I have data that as a scientist I'm a little bit happier about. Lots of graphs, and now we can start to do linear regressions and look at patterns. We can see right away that there are some patterns that are showing up, and if you want to talk about statistics later, I'd be happy to do so. But for now, this was the first time that the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument staff had ever been able to visualize how patterns of impairments was changing over the past 20 years or so. So they were pretty excited about this. And the general pattern that we see is that those impairments track visitation rates. So in this particular graph, which is, again, data that, because we have a good relationship, they were able to share with me. And what we can see is that, as you would expect, visitation to the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument has changed over time. We've got a couple different things going on in this graph. The size or the height of the bars tells you how many visits we're getting each year. Recreation specialists have another term they used called visitor days, which is a measure of the length of time that people spend on the monument. So the height of the bar is the number of visits, and the darkness of the bar is how long they're staying, essentially. And what we can see in this particular graph is that we see the increase in visitation rate over time as the monument gains notoriety, but then we can also see a peak in 2020, right? COVID, everyone in the world wanted to come to rural areas and escape the disease. And we see a decline in individual visits after 2020, but we see an increase by 6 times the number of days that people are staying on the monument. And this changes how we manage those monument resources, right? If a person just comes in for a day, they can't scratch too much graffiti into the sandstone. But if they're there for a week, they can scratch a lot of stuff into the sandstone and leave a lot of trash for us to pick up. So it just helps us manage visitors and learn about where resources are going to be impacted. Okay, let's talk about our stewardship program and what they do. These are a couple volunteers from the Wilderness Volunteers Program, which is another nonprofit. And this organization comes in and helps us out because their volunteers want to go to spectacular places and do good work. They want to engage in service. So our stewardship program partners with our conservation program. They work on WSA monitoring. They have just recently started a new fencing project around springs on the monument, and the monument is very much a desert environment. But we have these amazing springs that come up, and they haven't been protected from cattle in some locations. So we're working with multiple tribes to help fence off these really precious springs that are sacred to the tribes and precious to other people who visit, and work together to really protect this environment. We do a lot of remediation work. We scrape off graffiti, pick up trash, clean up fire pit rings. We have a Trail Ambassadors program that trains volunteers to go to the trailheads and keep an eye out for that person who's about to go on a 10-mile hike with no water at all or a pair of flip-flops. We give them water and we tell them what to look out for and really try to make sure they don't die when they're out there. You know, it's very gruesome, but 6 people have already died in southern Utah this year from heat exposure. They come in and they think, oh, 100 degrees is not that bad. But 100 degrees and 6% relative humidity is deadly if you don't bring any water with you. So it's a good program. We save people's lives. We help train guides who are bringing visitors from all over the world, all over the monument, and maybe encountering cultural sites, sacred sites, and we help them learn how to be respectful of those sites and improve the overall program that they're giving to their customers. We've been working a lot with the tribes in the past couple of years on resource management plans to make sure that the tribes know that they are welcome to be engaged. It's not quite the right word, but you know, these groups have been historically excluded from monument management since the creation of the monument. So sometimes you need that friend there with you to take you in and say, yeah, your opinions are valid and we'll help you get your comments in on the resource management plan that's going to guide all management on the monument for the next 20 years maybe. We also work with affiliation groups such as Hiking My Feelings, a little bit more cheerful type of a subject. These are people who are interested in the mental health benefits of being outside in nature and also want to contribute something while they're out there. So they'll often go out for a day and journal and write and soak in nature and then spend a day with us helping to clean up a site that is heavily impacted. How has our volunteer community grown? Hey, we just started this program in 2021, so it's brand new. And you can see in 2021, we only had about 20 volunteers. That went up by 6 times in 2022, and then stayed about the same as in 2023 as we got our feet under the ground there. And in 2024, as of June, we're on track to probably double again that number of volunteers working with us. And the folks in this picture are scrubbing graffiti off, and you have to do it in the right way. If you just go with a cloth or something, you can really make it worse. So we have a trained group that comes in and teaches volunteers how to clean up graffiti. So one question that people have is, can I still be a scientist if I work for a friends group? Well, you already saw all the great graphs that I made, and you get to continue with your identity if you work for a friends group. This particular picture is a dinosaur dig on the monument, which is famous for all the dinosaurs that have been discovered there. And this particular monument is actually known as the Science Monument, right? So there is a lot of science going on this particular monument. And I'll just list them there for you. And if you really want to stay connected to academics, NSF now has a program where you have to have an on-the-ground conservation partner to actually apply for this NSF funding. And we have a partner and we are applying this year. Okay, so let's totally switch gears and talk about why is it important to keep track of national policy. So when I was doing my Fulbright Fellowship, I was there to learn about seeds and pollinators. And I just kind of wanted to do a back of the napkin visualization of how policy might affect publication in scientific journals. So on this particular graph, you can see on the y-axis the number of publications that I just got off Google Scholar. This is very rough work. And then I have decade when the work was published. So what you can see in here is that, as you might expect, interest in pollinators and publications related to pollinators has grown over time since the 1970s. And then in 2000, I think it says 16, colony collapse disorder was described. And I thought, well, that must be a huge impetus for a lot of publications, right? Colony collapse disorder was this horrible thing. Honeybee colonies were dying all over the world. There was talk of, mass human starvation because of colony collapse disorder. What do we all think happened in the next decade? We go up, 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 up. stay the same, or go down? Let's see if we can get a couple hands. What do we think? Up or down? Thumbs. Okay, so not that much really, right? Not as much as you might expect given the predictions of collapse of global civilization because of the colony collapse disorder. In this decade, however, President Barack Obama made a presidential proclamation about the importance of pollinators. And that generated mandates throughout different agencies to start thinking about pollinators. And what we see, and here we only have 3 years of the next decadal increment, look at how many more publications have been generated since that implementation of policy. Now, I'm not saying that this is a causal relationship. This is just me goofing around on Google Scholar on the weekends. But I did pay attention to these things and was able to start chatting with the Forest Service and the BLM. You know, what's your policy on pollinators? Do you have a program about measuring pollinators? And I was contacted by the state of Utah to help write a law about improving pollinator habitat in the state of Utah. So if you keep track of these things and you're following the pulse of politics, sometimes you can find really amazing opportunities, or you can predict that they're about to come. Okay, we'll move on and talk about more policy. The bipartisan infrastructure law, our plants infrastructure. What do we think? You know, you go out in the field with these beautiful purple bee plants and it's awesome, but is that infrastructure? Well, it turns out the federal government has invested a ton of money in seed production, wildland seed collection, growing more seeds for restoration work and for research. So yes, seeds and native plants are considered part of our nation's infrastructure, and that's reflected in the current administration's funding of native plant seed collection and research work. You can see in total in this Investing in America platform, they've already invested over $11 billion, that's billion dollars, in the Department of the Interior, and $1.4 billion of that is going towards ecosystem restoration, and a portion of that goes to native plant work. So how might my organization, which has been doing native plant work in the Seeds of Success program since 2017, how might we partner with the Colorado Plateau Native Plant Program? We've got a lot of stuff on tap. We're developing tribal partnerships, and we're currently working on a cooperative agreement to develop a native plant center with the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah that will be fully managed by the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, which is fantastic. We'll be working with them and other organizations to do native plant seed collections on the 2 million acres of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. We'll be doing or facilitating research in restoration and genetic seed transfer zones. You can't just pick up some seeds from a plant in one place and put them in another place. That you have to know which seeds are meant for the right location and the right time. We'll also be looking at propagation techniques and developing volunteer programs, because it's going to take a lot of work to develop the seed banks that we need for the restoration purposes that we foresee with climate change affecting our every move. And then we'll also be working on seed and seedling production to make sure that we have the tools we need, the infrastructure, to do that restoration work. Okay, another rule that you might know, or another policy that you might have heard of, is the public lands rule. This is an amazing new rule that guides conservation on public lands throughout the entire United States. This is a quote, it's meant to protect clean air and wildlife habitat, restore land and waters that need it, and make decisions based on science. So this is a brand new rule. It's absolutely fantastic. It's in the process of being finalized right now, and soon will be published, and it has some tools associated with it. Restoration and mitigation leases. And these are really amazing because historically what we've had on these millions of acres of Bureau of Land Management land are grazing leases, mining leases, timber leases, but not conservation leases. So these restoration leases will be used to put conservation on equal footing with all of those other uses. Cattle is a huge one out in the West, right? We probably all know. And so, of course, there's a lot of pushback on this rule. The state of Utah has joined the state of Wyoming to sue the federal government to prevent the implementation of this rule. And anyway, it's going to be amazing when it's in place. It's just about there. Okay. Another thing to pay attention to is the importance of recreation. The BLM just released its blueprint for 21st century outdoor recreation. And the reason they did this is because so many people were visiting public lands for recreation purposes. So you can see on this graph, 81 million in the blue bars, 81 million visits in 2022. But spending for those visits has declined over time. So right now, only 74 cents per visit is being invested in BLM staff and resources to support these recreation visitors. The policy itself, it's not quite a policy yet, it's more like guidelines, but it's something to really pay attention to because it's trying to develop resources. And you might think about, well, recreation ecology and measuring the impacts of people on public lands. How can we work together to meet the demand for all of these people and protect and restore the resources and while improving access at the same time? All of those other things were current administration. I can tell by the audience that some of you know what Project 2025 is. There's absolutely things in there to consider. So this is not current policy. This is forecasted policy or maybe something that might happen in the future depending on how the fall goes. So in the Project 2025 playbook, we'll say, they've already outlined some actions that will directly affect me and my job. One is to repeal the Antiquities Act. The Antiquities Act is one of the main tools that Congress and the President uses to designate national monuments and create these, protect these amazing places. They would like to review national monuments, calling out the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument by name, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. They'd like to dismantle the America the Beautiful initiative, which you may know is the 30 by 30 Act. Of course, develop coal, oil, and gas, uranium mining, delist delist protected species under the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, increase timber sales, and lots more. Just go have a look. But for my organization, here's a picture of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. This is not a hypothetical for us. When you look at this picture, you'll see two different colors of, beige, yellow. The lighter color encompasses the entire area of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument as it stands today. But in 2017, the monument was shrunk by about half, so down to around 1 million acres in size. And the dark areas on this map show you what was left. And it turns out the areas that were now unprotected were some prime areas for coal development, uranium, and other activities that are of extractive nature. So let's end with a more cheerful note. How can I get involved with a friends group? This is a map that I created to look at all the different friends groups for all the different types of lands in the BLM's National Conservation Land System. And what you can see is if you're in the West, you're in pretty good shape. There are lots of different public lands that you could join a friends group or start a friends group. But don't despair if you're in the eastern part of the United States. This map does not show you all the national forests, all the national parks, all the state parks, all the fish and wildlife refuges. If there is a land that is preserved, you can create a friends group for it. It does not have to be one that already exists, and the friends groups that do exist are looking for help and looking for your scientific input all the time. So, in conclusion, try partnering. It could change your life, and it definitely changed mine. And with that, I'll leave you with a quote from the Maori in New Zealand that I find really inspiring, and I'd be happy to take any questions at either of our 2 microphones. I think we have one on either side. This is a picture of my team. You can see we're a very small group, but we're working really hard. And when you ask your question, please come up and state your name and your affiliation so we get a feel for who you are. Thank you. So you have a question, come on down to the microphones. They're lit up on either side. And if you have something that you'd like to ask me later, just come and find me. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Okay, I think over here is our first one.
Great. Thank you. My name is Dave Bound. I'm a professor at a small teaching institution in Pennsylvania called Elizabethtown College. And excellent talk, by the way. Very, very enjoyable and informative. I do have a question. When you listed that as an academic, you have all those different roles. And I know often as an academic, speaking to a lot of academics, so much of our professional identity is wrapped up in that role and everything that that encompasses. And I know, so my question is, how did you come to terms with leaving that part of the identity? I know you spoke about you still have the identity as a scientist and can still contribute in that way, but could you speak to the, I guess, the greater totality of who you were and who you are now and that transition?
Yes,
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you for that question. I was promoted to full professor just last year when I came back from New Zealand. And it was really a struggle, right? Because you've invested so much of your life. You've got that sunken cost syndrome where I've just kept putting stuff in this bucket. How can I walk away from this particular bucket? And I think that the amount of work I was doing and the expectations to continue that amount of work were so overwhelming that in part helped me to walk away. But then also knowing that this friends group was for the science monument, and I got just lots of encouragement from people I knew in many different agencies and other aspects of my life saying, this is perfect for you. You should do this. This is going to be a good fit. So I guess have a really supportive network and also know that when you make that change, you're still the same person that you were, and you may have access to more resources than you even imagined. I thought I would be spending all day, writing up employee reports and managing budgets, but I was able, really quickly to start saying, ooh, that's a cool science question, and this is a cool science question, and how can stewardship and my conservation program start working together to implement and enhance science on the monument?
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, we'll go over here.
Hello, I'm Joni Baumgarten. I'm sort of in transition, so I'm with Bryn Mawr College and Temple University, and also the Soil Ecology Society. So, like you're saying, many hats, working very hard to get ahead. Academia is crazy. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, perhaps what you might call code switching. It seems like you are actually doing the work with the tribes in Utah to represent their interests to a predominantly white audience. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, how you navigated that, how you, the word is coming betrayed, how you didn't betray the tribes, basically. But not that word, it's just that's what came to mind.
Sure. Part of the tribal culture with the main tribe that I work with, the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah, is exchange of gifts and respect. So the very first time I ever met with them, I brought them seeds. And we started a conversation around a shared interest, which was seeds and native plants. And how could we work together to enhance what they were doing with seeds and what they wanted to do with seeds and native plants. So we always had a very clear shared goal of what we wanted to do, and I'm a very pushy, bossy person. And so I really had to like pull that back and make sure that they got to lead the way when they wanted to lead the way, and that I could step in when they wanted me to step in. So a lot of that is just about navigating relationships, being socially aware of what's going on around you, and being careful to respect and want to learn, like to actively want to learn about a different culture and how they do things. And of course, it doesn't hurt to bring a bunch of money with you to help them achieve their goals. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah,
Welcome.
that's just like a thing I say that keeps me in academia, like trying to get money where it needs to go, like if I can help that.
Beautiful.
So yeah, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll go over here now.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm a master's student at the University of Pennsylvania. I just wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about your work making seed banks in New Zealand, and then how you sort of transitioned that experience and that knowledge to your role now.
Can you repeat it just one more time?
Yeah,
So make sure I understand.
Just to talk about sort of the work you were doing in New Zealand with seed banking, and then taking that experience and bringing it back to Southern Utah.
Sure. So the reason I was selected to be a Fulbright Fellow in New Zealand is because I wanted to learn more about their seed banking program and how it interfaced with the Maori culture and the Maori people in New Zealand. When I first applied in 2019, they were talking about creating seed barrels that they could bring to the different iwi, which is a Maori word for tribe, so they could bring these to the different tribes, and each tribe could then be in charge of developing its seed collections. Of course, things changed radically after 2020, and by the time I got there, that whole program had gone to the wayside and was completely changed. So instead, what I did was learn about what the seed bank, the New Zealand Indigenous Flora Seed Bank, was doing at the time, and how it might be improved in the future to better incorporate Maori views. You're only there for 5 months working, so it's not really a ton of time to delve into the system and figure out all of its kinks. But I was able to see some seed collection programs with Maori people that worked really, really well, and I was able to see some other seed banking programs that just did not work at all. And that was really informative.
Thank you.
Okay, back over here.
Hi, my name is Greg Spooner. I'm with the Climate Justice Group Scientist Rebellion. I really appreciated your remarks about Project 2025. And I'm wondering if you've got similar insights you might be able to share about the recent Supreme Court decision gutting Chevron deference doctrine that allows agencies like the BLM to carry out their missions. If you've got any insights about what the future might hold for that, the consequences of that Supreme Court decision.
Sure. I actually have some conflicting thoughts about the Chevron decision, because in some circles, the Supreme Court's take on this law, it's been viewed as just completely gutting our system and taking away all of our ability to fight environmental crimes, essentially. But I've also spoken to some lawyers who say without the Chevron doctrine in place, it actually might be easier to take on some of these battles. And that's about all I know about it. So, sorry. Okay, back over here.
Hi, my name is Madhusudan Katti, and I'm from North Carolina State University, and I'm also the editor-in-chief of the Bulletin. And I think I would love to see an essay from you about your experience in making this transition in the Bulletin.
Oh.
But I also have a question.
Okay.
Specifically, I'm interested in decolonizing our approaches to ecology and conservation. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a bit more about your perspective on engaging with indigenous communities, but also, given the history of the BLM and the tensions that have been there, on the one hand, and also given, there is a push in conservation towards more indigenous-led conservation projects. as well, co-management or giving land back. Have you had any conversations along those lines, and what's your perspective on that?
Sure, sure. So in terms of co-stewardship or co-management of the monument, that is something that we're actively working on with the tribes. And again, it's multiple tribes, and within tribes there are different bands. So it's bringing a lot of different people to the table just on the tribal side, and then working with the federal agencies. So Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument has connections to, again, multiple tribal nations. And we're trying to figure out how to get their voices heard in a way that looks like co-stewardship. It's probably not going to look like co-management. Bears Ears National Monument, which is also in Utah and also been very controversial, they actually have a intertribal council of representatives from all the tribes that have a connection to that monument, and they're able to approach this question in a much different way. On our side, what we're trying to do is develop these cooperative agreements with the Bureau of Land Management that brings the tribe to the table as an equal partner, where they get to tell the BLM, we want this portion much of the seeds that are going to be collected, and we want to have a voice in which species of plants the seeds are collected from. And we want to make some decisions about how the plants might be used by the tribe and also how they might be used by the agency itself. So we're still working on the details of that particular cooperative agreement, but we're in a really good place to start that work in 2026. Land back is a completely different issue, and if that comes up, I'm sure we'll start to have those conversations. But yes, we are working on it, and the way that I tend to work is through known systems, and so I'm working through the cooperative agreement system, which is a way that the federal agency can transfer funds from them to partners, tribal partners, or nonprofit partners to get the work done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. There's a lot more to talk about in my transition besides the little bit that I was able to answer in that section. Back over here.
Thanks so much for sharing your work and also a bit of the story of how you got here. My name's Abe Borker. I'm a professor at University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm really interested how the organizational structure of being a nonprofit aligned with a federal agency can be a hindrance or help when you're trying to impact change. So I'm wondering where you feel like the nonprofit structure really complements maybe some of the rigidity of federal employees and federal abilities, just your perspective on that for other types of partnered groups.
Sure. So this particular nonprofit that I work for is super loosey-goosey with its structure, right? We all chat with each other on a regular basis, but I'm remote. I work in Cedar City, Utah, which is about 2.5 hours from where the main group of employees is, which is only like 4 or 5 other people. And then we have another employee in another location, again, on the edge of the monument, but the monument is huge. It's just enormous. So we're distributed, and what that means, if you don't have your boss, which would be me, looking over your shoulder all the time, I have to trust that these employees, that the people I work with are going to make good decisions. So that's the looseness side of things. But then when we think about working with the federal agencies are very rigid. And if I say there's a road over here and I want to rehabilitate a road, that sets off all kinds of alarm bells. It riles up the community. I have had to learn some language. So we don't call them roads, even if they're, old roads, we call them linear disturbances on the landscape. So that's like the rigid side of things. You got to figure out the language. For that slide showing all the different impairments, we have long conversations about, are they impacts, are they intrusions, are they violations, are they impairments? You know, what was the right word to use for all of these different terms? So, you know, being an academic, you're used to jargon and you're used to figuring out the vocabulary. When you read a paper, there's always something in there that you haven't heard of before. and same with the federal government. So it's great being on this side of things where we can kind of figure out how to get some work done outside the confines of the federal system. And if you want to talk more about what an actual example, happy to talk about it while I'm not being recorded.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Alyssa Diodato. I work as a native plant gardener at the Riverside Park Conservancy in New York City, which is also a nonprofit that works with a government organization, albeit on a much smaller scale. And I'm also an incoming part-time online student through a program from the Idaho University. And I feel like there are a million questions I could ask you based on like native plant seed collections, which I'm a huge nerd about as well. But I think what I also wanted to touch on was sort of the balance of personal and professional lives. You mentioned moving around the country a lot of times to a lot of different places. And I guess I just wanted to ask how you balance personal and professional, especially in a field where we really go after our passions, and it's hard not to put all of yourself into your job, but how to do that and do good work while also preventing burnout.
Oh, the burnout question. Yeah. So in part, it was super helpful. My husband's also an academic and very understanding of who I am and the kind of personality I have and the things that I go after, right? So having an understanding partner of whatever sort is really important. We only had one child, so that also simplifies things, right? Yeah. And because I did so much field work in the summer, I dragged that kid along everywhere with me, and that helped maintain family relationships. However, he does not want to be a biologist. He's now 17 and he's going into business, which my husband and I are both like, what? But cool, we're glad for you. There's still going to be some science and data analytics in there, so we can let him do that one. Yeah, so a lot of it is figuring out how much you can take, how much you can deal with, and how much of yourself you want to give away. And we can chat more offline if you'd like to know more details.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And I think that concludes things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie, for that wonderful opening plenary. And thank you to all of you for coming and starting this meeting off right. I want to thank Shahid, Elizabeth, Heather, and Jackie. You've all made this opening plenary just a wonderful opportunity to reflect on the importance of ecology, how ecology can help us make good change in the world. And in shaping thought, informing decisions, and helping us all to just make a difference. So we all have a really exciting week ahead. And I want to remind us all to take care of yourselves throughout this week. Enjoy the time with your colleagues, face-to-face in 3D. And let's revel in this opportunity to exchange ideas, engage in scientific discourse, and learn from one another. And so with that, I'm going to invite you all to the welcome reception that'll be in the exhibit hall right as we conclude now. So that's going to be out of the theater, venturing back over the Rainbow Bridge to where the registration desks are, and then going past where you picked up your badges and all that information and down into the exhibit hall where there's the sections, the chapters, the exhibitors, the vendors, the sponsors, and those light refreshments. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.